The unlikely arrangement. Hello, my dear listeners. How are you? I hope you're all well and your hearts are open to another story that will make us reflect on the mysterious paths of love and how life sometimes puts us in situations we never thought we'd live through. Today, I've brought you a very special narrative that takes place here in Cambridgeshire, and it will show us how true love can be born in the most difficult moments and completely transform two lives. It is the story of Isabella, a pure and innocent girl of just 18, who will discover that sometimes what seems like a curse can become the greatest blessing of our lives. And also of Julian, a 35-year-old man who built an empire, but who, 5 years ago, lost the ability to love until the day his eyes met hers. You will be moved by their first glances, by the delicate way love gradually grows, and by a family that will show that true affection doesn't depend on blood, but on the heart. Prepare for moments of tension, emotional discoveries, and proof that when love is true, it always finds a way to win. Before we start our journey together, don't forget to like this video to support our channel. Subscribe if you're not yet part of the family, and turn on the notification bell, because stories like this deserve to be shared. And tell me in the comments, do you believe that love can completely transform a person? Leave your experiences and thoughts there. Now get comfortable, grab a cup of tea, and let's discover how Isabella and Julian wrote one of the most touching love stories I have ever told here. I'm sure you'll leave different after this narrative. Shall we begin? Isabella Stone woke up that Tuesday morning in Cambridge with the same ache in her chest she had felt for months. The sound of pots and pans falling in the kitchen already indicated that her father had started drinking again during the night. At 18, she was already all too familiar with that painful routine that repeated itself almost every day since her mother had died 3 years ago. She got out of the narrow bed she shared with her younger sister Sophia, who was just 12, and went to the kitchen of their simple house in the King's Hedges district. Edward Stone was sitting at the table, his hands trembling and his eyes red from not sleeping well. "Dad, are you okay?" Isabella asked, with the gentle voice she always used so as not to irritate him further. He looked up at her, and Isabella noticed there was something different in his gaze. It wasn't just the usual hangover. It was fear. "Isabella, my daughter, I need to talk to you." Edward's voice was hoarse, heavy with a sadness that made her heart ache even more. She sat in the plastic chair across from her father, holding his hands, which were shaking uncontrollably. "Dad, tell me what happened. You went to those places again, didn't you?" Isabella already guessed the answer, but needed to hear it. In recent months, Edward had sunk deeper and deeper into a gambling addiction, frequenting clandestine houses scattered around Cambridge and the surrounding area. It was as if after his wife's death, he had completely lost his way in life, seeking an escape from the pain in his heart and the impossible luck of gambling. Isabella always tried to convince him to stop, but her words seemed to echo in a void. "I made a big mistake, honey. A mistake that will change our lives forever." Edward started crying, and Isabella had never seen her father in that state. "I owed Silas, that man who runs the gambling house downtown, £15,000. I thought I could win it back, that everything would be all right. But I lost everything, Isabella. I lost even what I didn't have." The words came out in fragments, mixed with sobs that made his body shake. Isabella felt the world spin around her. £15,000 was more money than she could imagine. Her meager salary as a cleaner in a few houses in the neighborhood was barely enough to buy the basics for the home, and now she discovered her father owed a fortune to dangerous people. "Silas gave me a deadline until this afternoon, Isabella. If I don't pay, he said he'll hurt you both, you and Sophia." Edward held his daughter's hands tightly, as if he were drowning, and she was the only lifeline. "But he gave me an option, honey. an option I never thought I would have to consider in my life. The silence that fell in the kitchen was heavy, charged with a tension that Isabella could feel in the air. She looked at her father, seeing in the 45-year-old man a reflection of what pain and addiction could do to a person. "What option, Dad?" she asked, although a part of her already dreaded the answer. "There's a man, a very rich businessman here in Cambridge, who was interested in—" Edward couldn't finish the sentence. Isabella felt a cold chill in her stomach, a terrible premonition of what was to come. "Dad, just tell me, what man is this?" She tried to keep her voice firm, but inside she felt her life was about to change forever. "His name is Julian Thorne. He owns companies. He owns a lot of things here in the city. Silas said he was willing to pay my entire debt, but in exchange—" Edward stopped again, looking at his daughter with a mixture of shame and despair that broke Isabella's heart. "In exchange for what, Dad?" Isabella asked, though she knew deep down what the answer would be. "In exchange for you, honey. He wants you to go live with him, to be his." Edward's words fell on Isabella like a bucket of cold water. For a few seconds, she couldn't process what she had heard. To be sold as if she were an object, as if she were a commodity to pay off her father's debts. "Dad, you can't be serious. This isn't a thing. This is—" Isabella got up from the chair, pacing the small kitchen, while she tried to understand the magnitude of what was happening. "I know it's crazy, honey, but if I don't do this, they'll hurt you, and I can't let that happen." "But Dad, you don't even know this man. What if he's dangerous? What if he hurts me?" Isabella felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but fought to keep them in. She had always been the strong one in the family, the one who took care of everyone. And now she needed to be strong once more. "Silas said he's a serious man, that he just wants company, that he'll treat you well and give you a good life." Edward spoke as if he were trying to convince himself that he was doing the right thing. "And Sophia, Dad? What about Sophia?" Isabella thought of her younger sister, who was still sleeping in the bedroom, not imagining that when she woke up, her life would also be turned upside down. The next 2 hours passed like a nightmare. Isabella tried to find other solutions. She thought of borrowing money from her employers, but knew no one would have £15,000 to lend a cleaner. She thought of running away with Sophia, but where would they go? How would they survive? Her father explained that Julian Thorne would send for Isabella at 3 in the afternoon, and that the debt would be considered settled. "Honey, I promise I'll change. I'll stop drinking. I'll take care of Sophia. I'll work to get you back." Edward cried like a child, but Isabella knew they were empty promises. The addiction had taken over his life in a way that seemed irreversible. When the black car stopped in front of Isabella's simple house, she felt like she was living in a movie. A tall man in a dark suit got out of the vehicle and knocked on the door. "Are you Isabella Stone?" he asked in a formal voice. "I am," she replied softly, holding a small suitcase with her few clothes. Sophia was crying, clinging to her sister, not quite understanding what was happening, but knowing that something terrible was tearing their family apart. "Take care of Sophia, Dad. If anything happens to her because of you, I'll never forgive you." Isabella said these words looking directly into Edward's eyes, and he lowered his head in shame. The trip to Julian Thorne's mansion took only 20 minutes, but to Isabella, it felt like an eternity. She looked out the car window, watching Cambridge pass before her eyes, and wondering if she would ever see her home, her sister, or her old life again. When the car entered the mansion gates in the Central Industrial District, Isabella understood she was entering a world completely different from her own, a world where she didn't know what the rules were or what was expected of her. Julian Thorne's mansion was bigger than any house Isabella had ever seen in her life. The front garden looked like a park, with well-kept plants and a fountain in the middle that made a soft sound of running water. When she got out of the car, her legs trembled so much she could barely walk straight. The driver took her small suitcase to the front door, where a woman in her 50s was waiting for her with a gentle smile. "You must be Isabella. I'm Mrs. Carter. I've been taking care of the house here for more than 15 years. The woman's voice was gentle, with a strong accent that reminded Isabella of her own mother. "Come on, honey. Mr. Thorne is waiting for you in the main living room." Isabella followed Mrs. Carter through immense corridors, with paintings on the walls and furniture that seemed too expensive to be real. Everything there smelled of cleanliness and a soft perfume she couldn't identify. When they reached the room, Isabella saw a tall, broad-shouldered man standing with his back to her, looking out the window. Even without seeing his face, she could feel a strong energy coming from that figure. Julian turned slowly, and Isabella had to swallow hard when his eyes met hers. He was handsome in a way that was frightening, with dark hair combed back, deep brown eyes, and a well-kept beard that gave his face an even more serious air. He must have been in his mid-30s, and he wore a white dress shirt that showed off his athletic body. "So you are Isabella Stone." His voice was deep, firm, but not threatening as she had imagined. "I am, sir," Isabella replied softly, looking at the floor because she couldn't hold his gaze for long. It was as if those eyes could see right through her, discovering all her fears and insecurities. "Mrs. Carter, can you show her to her room, please?" Julian spoke without taking his eyes off Isabella. "We'll talk about the house rules later." Isabella felt her heart race at the word rules. What kind of rules would a man like that have? She followed Mrs. Carter to the second floor, up a marble staircase that was so shiny she was afraid of slipping. The room that would be hers was bigger than the entire living room of the house where she lived with her father and sister. It had a double bed with white sheets that looked like silk, a huge dark wood wardrobe, and a window that overlooked the backyard. "What a beautiful room, Mrs. Carter," Isabella whispered, touching the bedspread carefully as if it would break. "Mr. Thorne had everything prepared especially for you." "Honey, he might seem a little tough, but he has a good heart," Mrs. Carter said softly, as if she were telling a secret. During the first few days, Isabella barely saw Julian. He would leave early in the morning and only return late at night when she was already in her room. Mrs. Carter explained that he had several companies scattered around Cambridge and the surrounding area, and that he worked a lot. After his first wife died, about 5 years ago, he only lives for work. He's barely ever home. Isabella learned that Julian had been married, and that made her even more nervous. What was his wife like? Why had she died? And why would a rich man like him need to buy a woman instead of finding someone who truly loved him? The question swirled in her head during the silent days in the mansion, where the only noise was the sound of the staff taking care of the house and the garden. Mrs. Carter taught Isabella where everything was in the house. She showed her the huge kitchen, with an industrial stove and a double refrigerator, the dining room with a table for 12 people, and even a library with hundreds of books that went from the floor to the ceiling. "Mr. Thorne loves to read. He's always been that way since he was little," his mother says. Isabella was curious to know more about his family, but didn't have the courage to ask. At night, when she was alone in her room, she would look out the window and think of Sophia. Was her sister okay? Was her father taking good care of her? Or had he started drinking again? The longing ached in her chest in a way that hurt physically, but she knew she could do nothing but wait and hope that everything would turn out all right. Isabella has just entered a world of luxury and loneliness. What do you think Julian expects from her? How do you think she can cope with the fear and sadness she's feeling? Share your thoughts and predictions in the comments. On Thursday of her first week, Isabella was helping Mrs. Carter arrange flowers in the garden when she heard the sound of Julian's car arriving earlier than usual. It was only 3 in the afternoon, and he never got home before 8. "Mrs. Carter, Mr. Thorne is here," Isabella said, getting up from the ground where she was planting some yellow flowers she didn't know the name of. "That's strange. He never gets home this early." Mrs. Carter wiped her hands on her apron and looked at Isabella with a smile. "He probably wants to get to know you better, honey. You've been here for almost a week and have barely spoken." The idea of talking to Julian made Isabella nervous, but at the same time, she felt a strange curiosity about the man who had changed her life overnight. Julian entered the house and went straight to the garden, as if he knew exactly where to find Isabella. She was standing next to Mrs. Carter, her hands dirty with soil and her hair a little messy from the wind. When he approached, Isabella could smell his cologne, something distinctive and masculine that made her heart race for no apparent reason. "Isabella, I need to talk to you." His voice sounded softer than in the first few days, less formal. "Mrs. Carter, can you leave us alone, please?" The housekeeper discreetly moved away, but Isabella noticed she stayed nearby, as if she wanted to protect her from something. "Sit here with me." Julian pointed to a stone bench under a large tree that provided a pleasant shade. Isabella sat on the edge of the bench, leaving a large space between herself and Julian. Her hands trembled a little, and she hid them in the fabric of the simple dress she was wearing. "Are you enjoying staying here?" Julian asked, looking at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "It's all very good, sir. Mrs. Carter takes very good care of me," Isabella replied softly, still unable to look directly at him. "It's Julian. You can call me Julian," he said. And when Isabella finally looked up to meet his eyes, she felt a strange thing in her stomach, as if there were butterflies flying inside. How did you imagine things would happen?" Isabella asked, surprised by her own courage to ask a question. Julian was silent for a few seconds, looking at his hands. "I don't know exactly. It's been a long time since I've been in a relationship with anyone, since I've wanted to truly get to know a person. When Silas told me about your situation, I thought it would be simple. That it would just be..." He stopped talking, as if he had realized he was saying too much. "Just what?" Isabella insisted, feeling that she was finally getting to see a human side of the man who seemed so distant. "Just an arrangement, with no feelings involved. But you're different from what I expected." Julian looked at her again, and this time Isabella didn't look away. There was something in those brown eyes she couldn't understand, a mixture of sadness and curiosity that made her heart beat faster. The silence that fell between them was not as uncomfortable as Isabella had imagined it would be. It was as if they were both trying to understand each other, trying to figure out what to do with the strange situation they were in. "You can make yourself at home, Isabella. You don't need to hide in your room or just help Mrs. Carter. There's the library, there's the pool in the back, there's the whole garden," Julian said, getting up from the bench. "And if you need anything, you can tell me. I'm not a monster, even if I might look like one." When he said that, Isabella saw a small smile on the corner of his mouth, the first smile she had seen since she arrived at the mansion. In that moment, looking at Julian and walking back into the house, Isabella felt that perhaps her life in that place would not be the nightmare she had imagined. Isabella is starting to see a different side of Julian. What do you think is going to happen between them now? Will they be able to build a real relationship from such a strange beginning? What advice would you give them? Isabella woke up on Friday morning to a different noise coming from downstairs. Animated voices echoed through the house, mixed with laughter and the sound of suitcases being dragged across the marble floor. She looked at the clock on the nightstand and saw that it was only 7 in the morning. Julian never made noise at that hour. He always left in silence, so as not to wake anyone up. Curious, Isabella got out of bed, put on the bathrobe Mrs. Carter had left for her, and went to the window that overlooked the front entrance of the house. A different car was parked in front, and she could see 2 older people getting out of it with the help of a driver. The woman had gray hair in an elegant bun and was wearing a navy blue dress that looked expensive but discreet. The man was tall, like Julian, but older, with completely white hair and a wide smile that lit up his face. Mrs. Carter knocked on Isabella's bedroom door a few minutes later. "Honey, can you come down for breakfast? Mr. Thorne's parents have arrived from their trip, and he wants to introduce you to them." Isabella's heart raced. Julian's parents. No one had mentioned they were coming. How should she behave? What would they think of her? She quickly chose the prettiest dress she had, a simple light blue one that Mrs. Carter had bought for her the week before, brushed her long hair, and went downstairs with her legs trembling. The voices were coming from the dining room, and when Isabella got to the door, she saw Julian sitting at the table with the older couple. Everyone stopped talking when she appeared. "Dad, Mom, this is Isabella." Julian got up from the chair, and Isabella noticed that he seemed different in his parents' presence, more relaxed, more human. The older woman immediately got up from the table and walked toward Isabella with her arms open. "What a beautiful girl. Julian, you didn't tell me she was so pretty." Eleanor Thorne hugged Isabella as if she were a daughter she hadn't seen in years. The hug was warm and smelled good, and Isabella felt an emotion she hadn't felt since her mother had died. "I'm Eleanor, Julian's mother, and that's Robert, his father. You can call us Aunt Eleanor and Uncle Robert, okay, honey?" Her voice was sweet, full of genuine affection that made Isabella's eyes fill with tears. Robert also approached with a paternal smile that reminded Isabella of her own father in the good times, before the addiction. "So you're the Isabella our son told us about. It's a pleasure to meet you, my dear." He held out his hand to her, but when he saw that Isabella was emotional, he also pulled her into a hug. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cry. It's just that you're so kind," Isabella managed to say between the tears that insisted on flowing. "Oh, honey, this is your home now. We are your family." Eleanor held Isabella's hands, looking directly into her eyes. "Julian told us your story, about the difficult situation you were going through. But now you're here, and we're going to take care of you as if you were our own daughter." Julian watched everything in silence, with an expression Isabella had never seen before. It was as if he was surprised by his parents' reaction. During breakfast, Eleanor didn't stop asking Isabella questions. She wanted to know about her life, about her sister, and about what she liked to do. "I worked as a cleaner, Aunt Eleanor. I took care of some houses in the neighborhood, and I like to read when I have time," Isabella replied, still shy but feeling more and more comfortable. "Read, how wonderful. Julian also loves books. You two will have a lot to talk about," Robert commented, giving his son a wink. Isabella looked at Julian and saw that he was looking at her with renewed interest. "What kind of books do you like, Isabella?" Julian asked, leaning slightly toward her. "I like romances, the kind that talk about true love, you know? And I also like stories about people who manage to change their lives," Isabella replied, feeling her face flush when she talked about romances. "Our library is at your disposal, honey. There are hundreds of books in there. I'm sure you'll find a lot of interesting things," Eleanor said, serving more coffee to Isabella. "Aunt Eleanor also loves to read. You two will get along great," Julian commented. And Isabella noticed that there was a softer tone in his voice, different from the formality of the first few days. "Tell us about your sister, Isabella. How is she?" Robert asked with genuine concern. Isabella felt her chest tighten at the thought of Sophia. "She's 12. She's very smart and studious. I miss her very much." Isabella's voice was choked up, and Eleanor immediately held her hand on the table. "How about you bring her here to spend a weekend? It would be great to meet her too," Eleanor suggested, looking at Julian as if she were asking for his approval. Julian was silent for a few seconds, thoughtful. "If Isabella wants to, I don't see any problem at all," he finally replied, and Isabella felt her heart fill with joy. "Really? I can bring Sophia here?" she asked, almost not believing what she was hearing. "Of course you can, honey. This house is too big for so few people. It'll be nice to have a child running around here again," Robert said, looking at Eleanor with a nostalgic smile. Julian's parents have welcomed Isabella and her sister into their lives. What do you think Julian will do to get closer to Isabella now that he has his family's support? What do you think about the way his family accepted her so quickly? Share your thoughts below. After breakfast, Eleanor insisted that Isabella accompany her to the garden. "I want to get to know the girl who captured my son's attention better," she said, taking Isabella's arm as they walked among the flowers. "Aunt Eleanor, I didn't capture any attention. The situation is a bit complicated," Isabella tried to explain, but Eleanor interrupted her with a gentle wave of her hand. "Honey, I've known my son for 35 years. It's been 5 years since he showed any genuine interest in anyone. Last night, he called me talking about you, wanting to know when we were going to get here to meet you. That means something." Isabella's heart raced. Julian had talked about her to his parents? He's still hurt by the death of Catherine, his first wife. "It was a very difficult period for our family," Eleanor continued, sitting on a bench near the roses. "How did she die, Aunt Eleanor?" Isabella asked softly, feeling that she was approaching a delicate subject. "It was cancer, honey. Very aggressive, very fast. They had only been married for 2 years when they discovered the illness. Julian took care of her until the last day. He never left her side at the hospital," Eleanor said, wiping a tear that ran down her face. "After she was gone, he changed completely. He stopped smiling. He stopped being interested in anything that wasn't work. Robert and I were very worried, thinking he would never be happy again." Isabella listened to everything in silence, understanding better why Julian seemed so closed off and distant. "But yesterday, when he talked about you on the phone, I heard something in his voice that I hadn't heard in 5 years. A curiosity, a genuine interest in someone." Eleanor held Isabella's hands again. "I don't know what to do, Aunt Eleanor. This whole situation is very confusing for me. I came here because of my father's debts. It wasn't my choice," Isabella confessed, feeling that she could trust the woman who was treating her with so much affection. "Sometimes fate puts us in situations that seem wrong, but that end up being exactly what we needed, honey. Maybe you and Julian need each other more than you realize," Eleanor smiled, touching Isabella's face with maternal affection. "The important thing is that you give yourselves a chance to get to know each other for real, without rush, without pressure. True love doesn't have a deadline to arrive, but when it does, you know." At that moment, Isabella saw Julian approaching them through the garden. "Can I steal Isabella from you, Mom? I wanted to show her the library." Julian spoke, but Isabella noticed that he was a little nervous. "Of course, son. We've talked enough for today." Eleanor got up, kissed Isabella on the forehead, and whispered in her ear, "Give him a chance, honey. He's a good man." When Eleanor moved away, Julian stood next to Isabella, as if he didn't know exactly what to say. "Your parents are wonderful people," Isabella said, breaking the silence. "They liked you very much. My mom is already planning to teach you the family recipes," Julian replied. And Isabella noticed a small smile on the corner of his mouth. They walked together to the library, and Isabella was speechless at the number of books there. The shelves went from floor to ceiling, full of works of all kinds. "Oh my God, how many books!" she exclaimed, spinning in the middle of the room to try to see everything. "You can read any one you want. These here are romances." Julian pointed to a specific section, walking toward it. Isabella followed him, and when they got close to the shelves, she realized they were very close to each other. She could feel the warmth of his body, the smell of his cologne that was already becoming familiar. "Thank you for letting me bring Sophia here," Isabella said, looking at him. "I know how important it is to have family nearby." "It is," Julian replied. And when their eyes met, Isabella felt that strange sensation in her stomach again. This time she didn't look away, and she noticed that Julian didn't either. For a few seconds, they just stood there, looking at each other in silence, as if they were trying to understand what was happening between them. For the next 2 weeks, the Thorne mansion was transformed into a completely different place. Eleanor took on the role of the mother Isabella never had, teaching her about family traditions, Italian recipes that Robert had brought from Italy when he was young, and even some notions of etiquette that, according to her, every young lady needs to know. Honey, come here and see how to make our family's pasta sauce. My mother-in-law taught me this recipe when I married Robert, and now I'm going to teach it to you. Eleanor would call Isabella to the kitchen every morning, where they would spend hours talking and cooking together. Isabella had never felt so welcomed, so much a part of a real family. Robert, in turn, had a paternal and protective way that made Isabella feel safe. He would tell stories from Julian's childhood, how the boy had always been responsible and serious, but also fun moments that showed a lighter side of him. You know, Isabella, when Julian was little, he had a dog named Rex. He was a mutt he found on the street and brought home all hurt, Robert would say while having coffee on the porch, watching Julian arrive from work. Eleanor didn't want to let him stay. She said we didn't know where the animal came from. But Julian cried so much, begged so much, that we ended up giving in. He took care of that dog as if it were a treasure. He would bathe him, brush him, and sleep hugging him. Rex lived with us for 15 years. When he died, Julian was 22. He was a grown man, but he cried like a child. He always had a soft spot for anyone who needed care. Robert looked at Isabella with a meaningful smile. The interactions between Isabella and Julian also began to change gradually. He would get home from work earlier, have dinner with the whole family, and stay talking in the living room until later. Isabella discovered that he was smart in a way that impressed her. He would talk about business with passion, about books they read with enthusiasm, and had interesting opinions about everything. "What did you think of that Dickens book I lent you?" Julian asked one night while everyone was in the living room after dinner. "I loved A Tale of Two Cities. I felt sorry for Sidney Carton. I think he really loved Lucy," Isabella replied excitedly, to discuss the story. "Don't you think he was just doing it for show?" Julian asked, leaning forward in the armchair where he was sitting. "No, I think it was real love. True love doesn't do those things," Isabella spoke with conviction, and saw that Julian became pensive with her answer. Eleanor would watch these conversations with a discreet smile, exchanging knowing glances with Robert. They clearly saw that something was growing between their son and Isabella, even if the two of them were not yet fully aware of it. "Julian, why don't you take Isabella to see the factory tomorrow? She's never seen how a company works," Eleanor suggested one day during lunch. "Would you like to go, Isabella?" Julian asked, and she noticed an anxiety in his voice, as if the answer was important. "I'd love to. I've never been inside a factory in my life," Isabella replied sincerely, and saw Julian's face light up with a genuine smile. Robert and Eleanor exchanged another meaningful look, clearly satisfied with the two of them getting closer. Isabella and Julian are getting closer, but they haven't yet discussed their feelings. What do you think will happen when they finally do? How will Julian's past with Catherine affect his ability to open up to Isabella? The next day, Julian took Isabella to see the automotive parts factory he managed in the industrial district of Cambridge. Isabella was fascinated by the organization, by the employees who clearly respected and liked Julian, and by the way he knew every sector and cared about everyone's well-being. "Mr. Thorne is a very good boss," one of the oldest employees commented to Isabella, while Julian was talking to the supervisor. "When my daughter got sick, he paid for her private hospital. I'll never forget that." Isabella watched Julian with new eyes, seeing how he was respected not out of fear, but out of true admiration. On the way back home, she couldn't hide her admiration. "I never imagined you were like that at work. Everyone likes you so much," Isabella commented, looking at him while he was driving. "My father always taught me that leading is about taking care of people, not just giving orders," Julian replied, keeping his eyes on the road. But Isabella noticed that he was happy with the compliment. That night, after dinner, Julian invited Isabella to walk in the garden. Eleanor and Robert exchanged a look and discreetly retired to their room, leaving the two of them alone. "Want to see the part of the garden you haven't seen yet?" Julian asked, offering his arm to Isabella. She held his arm, feeling for the first time the intentional physical contact between them. They walked along a stone path that led to a small waterfall at the back of the property. "Wow, what a beautiful place. I didn't know this was here," Isabella exclaimed, enchanted by the sound of the falling water and the soft lights that illuminated the place. "I come here when I need to think, when the day has been difficult," Julian confessed, sitting on a smooth stone near the water. Isabella sat next to him, closer than she usually was. "Julian, can I ask you a question?" Isabella gathered her courage to talk about a subject that had intrigued her for days. "Of course, you can ask anything," he replied, looking at her with his full attention. Why did you accept that proposal from Silas? I mean, you could have any woman you wanted. You didn't need to." Isabella stopped, not knowing how to finish the sentence without sounding rude. Julian was silent for a long time, looking at the running water. "Because I didn't want to get emotionally involved with anyone. After Catherine, I thought I would never be able to love anyone again. That it would be easier to just have an arrangement," he said softly, as if he were confessing something painful. "And now? Do you still think that?" Isabella asked, feeling her heart race with her own courage. Julian turned to look directly at her, and Isabella saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. It was as if a barrier had fallen, as if he were allowing her to see who he really was, behind the protection he had built around his heart. "Now I don't know anything anymore, Isabella. You changed everything," he said, slowly raising his hand to touch her face. Isabella felt a shiver run through her entire body when his fingers touched her skin. "You're so different from everything I imagined, so pure, so true, and Julian stopped talking, slowly bringing his face closer to hers. Isabella closed her eyes, feeling her heart beat so fast she was sure he could hear it. When his lips touched hers, it was as if lightning had passed through Isabella's body. The kiss started soft, almost shy, but soon deepened when Isabella responded with an intensity that surprised her. She had never kissed anyone before, but with Julian, it felt natural, as if their bodies knew exactly what to do. His hands went up to her hair, while Isabella held his shoulders to keep her balance. When they finally separated, both were breathless. "Isabella," Julian whispered, resting his forehead against hers. "I didn't want this to happen. I didn't want to get attached to you." His confession made Isabella's heart ache. And now it has. "What are we going to do?" Isabella asked, looking into his eyes that sparkled in the light of the garden lamps. "I don't know. I just know that when I'm near you, I forget everything I swore to myself after I lost Catherine." Julian spoke, stroking Isabella's face with his thumb. "Swore what?" she asked softly. "That I would never let anyone into my heart again because it hurts too much when you lose them," Julian confessed, and Isabella saw tears forming in his eyes. "But you're not going to lose me, Julian. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere," Isabella said, holding his face in her hands. "You don't understand, Isabella. I bought you. How can we build something real on top of that?" His voice was heavy with guilt and anguish. "Maybe we can forget how it started and think about how it can end," Isabella suggested, surprising herself with the wisdom of her own words. Julian looked at her for a long time, as if he were seeing Isabella for the first time. "You're incredible, you know. You have a strength, a purity I've never seen in anyone," he said, kissing her forehead tenderly. "And you're much better than you think you are," Isabella replied, stroking his chest over his shirt. They sat there, embraced, listening to the sound of the water and feeling that their lives had changed forever that night. Isabella knew there was no turning back, that her heart already completely belonged to that complicated and wounded man who was learning to love again. And Julian, for the first time in 5 years, allowed hope to return to his life, even though he knew that to love meant to risk hurting again. The night in the garden changed everything. Julian and Isabella have admitted their feelings and shared a tender moment. What will they do now that their relationship is no longer just an arrangement? And how will this change affect their families and their future together? After that night in the garden, everything changed between Isabella and Julian. They could no longer pretend it was just an arrangement, that no feelings were involved. During the day, they would exchange meaningful glances, shy smiles, and casual touches that made both their hearts race. Eleanor and Robert noticed the change in the air, the different energy that hung over the house, and they were radiant, seeing their son finally showing signs of life and happiness. "Did you see how different Julian is? I caught him humming to himself while he was getting ready for work this morning," Eleanor commented to Robert and Isabella during breakfast. "I haven't seen him like this in years." Robert agreed, giving Isabella a wink, which made her blush. A week after their first kiss, Julian came home from work with a surprise. "Isabella, there's someone here who's dying to see you," he said, appearing at the kitchen door where she was helping Eleanor prepare dinner. Behind him, Sophia appeared, running with her face lit up with joy. "Isabella, sister!" The girl threw herself into Isabella's arms, who started crying with emotion. "My dear Sophia, how you've grown." Isabella hugged her tightly, feeling that piece of her heart that was hurt heal a little. "Julian picked me up from school. He has a very nice car," Sophia said excitedly, looking at Julian with admiration. "And he said I can stay the whole weekend." Isabella looked at Julian over her sister's head, with eyes full of tears of gratitude. "Thank you," she mouthed silently, and he just smiled, touched by her emotion. Eleanor immediately adopted Sophia as her honorary granddaughter, showering the girl with affection and attention. "What a beautiful princess! Julian, you didn't tell me Isabella's sister was so pretty," Eleanor said, adjusting Sophia's hair. "Aunt Eleanor, you're so nice. Isabella said you teach how to cook delicious things," Sophia replied with the spontaneity typical of a child, making everyone laugh. Robert also melted with the girl, offering to show her the collection of children's books he had kept since Julian was a child. "Want to see the books Julian read when he was your age?" Robert asked, and Sophia accepted eagerly. During dinner, the table was livelier than ever, with Sophia telling stories from school and asking questions about everything she saw in the mansion. Isabella watched her sister being treated with affection by the family that had welcomed her, and felt her heart fill with a deep gratitude. Later, after Sophia had fallen asleep in the guest room Eleanor had prepared especially for her, Isabella looked for Julian in the library. He was reading a technical book on business administration, but closed it as soon as she came in. "Thank you for picking up Sophia. You have no idea how much that means to me," Isabella said, sitting in the armchair next to his. "I saw how happy you were, and she's a lovely girl, very much like you," Julian replied, extending his hand to Isabella. She held his hand, intertwining their fingers, a gesture that was becoming natural between them. "Your parents are incredible people. Aunt Eleanor is already planning to make a room just for Sophia," Isabella commented, laughing softly. "My mom has always wanted to have grandchildren. She's fulfilling a dream by taking care of you two," Julian said, bringing Isabella's hand to his lips to kiss. The touch of his lips on her skin sent a wave of warmth through Isabella's body. In the past few weeks, the touches between them had become more frequent and more intimate, but always respectful, always full of tenderness. "Julian," Isabella whispered, looking into his eyes and seeing the same desire she felt burning inside her chest. "Yes, my love," he replied. The word love came naturally from his lips, and they both realized the weight of that moment. It was the first time he had called her that, and Isabella felt something definitely break inside her. I never... Isabella tried to speak, but the words got tangled in her throat. Julian understood what she was trying to say and got up, pulling her by the hand with delicacy. You don't have to say anything right now. There's no rush for anything. Julian spoke, but Isabella shook her head. It's not that. I want to be with you. For real. Isabella gathered all the courage she had to say what she had been feeling for weeks, the desire that grew inside her every time he touched her, every time he looked at her in that way that made her whole body tremble. Julian pulled her closer, holding her face in his hands. Are you sure? Isabella, you're so young, so pure. I don't want you to do anything you'll regret later. His concern was genuine, and it only made Isabella more certain of what she felt. I am sure, Julian. I love you. The words came from her heart without a filter, raw and true. Julian stood still for a few seconds, as if he couldn't believe what he had heard. You love me? He asked in a voice hoarse with emotion. I love you so much, it hurts my chest when you're not near, Isabella confessed, touching his chest over his shirt. Isabella, my love, I love you too. More than I ever imagined it was possible to love someone again. Julian kissed her with an intensity that took her breath away, a kiss that spoke of need, of desire, but also of tenderness and respect. When they separated, Isabella saw in his eyes the same decision she felt in her own heart. Come with me, Julian whispered, taking her hand and leading her out of the library. They went up the stairs in silence, their hearts beating so fast that Isabella was sure the sound echoed through the corridors. Julian led her to his room, which she had never entered before. It was a masculine, elegant space with dark furniture and a king-size bed that dominated the room. Are you absolutely sure? Julian asked one last time, standing in front of her, holding her hands in his. I've never been so sure of anything in my life, Isabella replied, approaching him and beginning to slowly unbutton his shirt. Her hands trembled a little, but not from fear. It was anticipation, a good nervousness, the emotion of someone who is about to live something they have dreamed of for a long time. Julian let her take off his shirt, watching her every move with a mixture of desire and tenderness that made Isabella feel like the most wanted woman in the world. When she was finished, he returned the favor, unbuttoning her dress with slow, careful movements, kissing every piece of skin that was revealed. You're so beautiful, Isabella. So perfect, he whispered between kisses, making her shiver all over. When they were only in their underwear, Julian carried her to the bed, laying her down carefully, as if she were made of crystal. I'm going to take care of you, love. I'm going to make it special, he promised, lying down next to her and pulling her into his arms. What happened next was like a dream for Isabella. Julian touched her with a reverence that made her feel sacred, kissed every part of her body as if he were praying, and whispered words of love in her ear that made her cry with emotion. When they finally became one, Isabella understood why people called it making love. It wasn't just physical. It was a connection of souls, a complete surrender that went far beyond pleasure. Julian was infinitely careful, stopping several times to make sure she was okay, kissing the tears of emotion that ran down her face. I love you so much, Isabella. So much it's scary, he whispered when she pressed herself against him, trying to get used to the new sensations. I love you too, forever, Isabella replied, looking into his eyes and seeing a vulnerability he had never shown anyone before. Afterward, when they were lying in each other's arms, Isabella with her head on Julian's chest, listening to his heartbeats, they both understood that their lives had changed forever. They were no longer just two people who had met by chance. They were a couple, a family, two halves who had found their completeness. Julian, Isabella whispered, drawing circles on his chest with her finger. "Yes, my love," he replied, kissing the top of her head. "I was just thinking. We could give the money back to those people. I don't want our story to start with that. I want it to be clean, to be true," Isabella said, lifting her head to look at him. Julian smiled, a smile full of pride and admiration. "I already took care of that 2 weeks ago, my love. Your father's debt was settled without involving you. Now you're here because you want to be, because we love each other." Isabella felt her eyes fill with tears of gratitude and love. You paid the debt even without me giving you anything in return. Isabella, the moment I fell in love with you, everything changed. You're not a possession. You're the woman I love and want by my side for the rest of my life. The next 2 months were the happiest of Isabella's life. She and Julian lived like a truly in love couple, with no more secrets, no more strange arrangements between them. Every morning, he would wake her up with a soft kiss on the face and a coffee in bed that he had made himself before going to work. "Good morning, my love. Did you sleep well?" Julian would whisper in her ear, making Isabella wake up smiling every day. She had never imagined that being loved could feel so good, so complete. Julian was affectionate, attentive, and treated her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. At night, when he came home from work, he would look for her immediately, wanting to know how her day had been, what she had done, and if she was happy. They would all have dinner together, Isabella, Julian, Eleanor, and Robert, like a real family. Sophia started coming to the mansion every weekend, and Julian made a point of picking her up from school personally on Fridays. The girl was completely enchanted with her brother-in-law, and Julian seemed to have discovered a paternal side he didn't even know existed. "Julian, can you teach me to drive when I grow up?" Sophia asked one day, while they were playing in the pool. "Of course, princess, but only when you're old enough, okay?" Julian replied, throwing her up and stopping her in the air, making the girl laugh loudly. Isabella would watch these scenes with a heart full of love, imagining what it would be like when they had their own children. Eleanor and Robert were radiant seeing their son's transformation. "I haven't seen Julian like this since before Catherine died," Robert commented to Isabella one day, while they were watching Julian playing with Sophia in the garden. "You gave him his life back, honey." Isabella's room had been officially moved to Julian's, and Eleanor made a point of helping to organize her clothes in his masculine closet. "Now you're a real couple. You have to share everything," Eleanor said, hanging Isabella's dresses next to Julian's suits. "Aunt Eleanor, sometimes I'm afraid it's all a dream and I'm going to wake up," Isabella confessed, sitting on the bed, watching her mother-in-law arrange her things. "Honey, when love is real, you feel that it's real. And what you two have is very real, very beautiful. Julian has never loved anyone as he loves you. Not even Catherine did he look at the way he looks at you." Those words filled Isabella's heart with a security she had never felt. On a Thursday morning, Isabella woke up feeling sick. She ran to the bathroom and vomited everything she had in her stomach, making Julian worried. "My love, are you okay? Do you want me to call a doctor?" He held her hair while she recovered, stroking her back with affection. "It must be something I ate yesterday. I'm already better," Isabella replied. But throughout the week, the nausea repeated itself, always in the morning, always at the same time. Eleanor was the first to suspect. "Isabella, honey, can I ask you a very personal question?" Eleanor asked, while they were having tea on the porch one afternoon. "Of course, Aunt Eleanor. You can ask anything," Isabella replied, noticing a special gleam in her mother-in-law's eyes. "When was your last period?" The question made Isabella stop with her teacup halfway to her mouth. She started counting mentally and realized she was more than 3 weeks late. "Oh my God, Aunt Eleanor, I hadn't even thought of that." Isabella instinctively put her hand on her belly, as if she could feel something different there. "Honey, I think you need to take a test. These morning sicknesses, the late period, you might be pregnant, Eleanor said with contained excitement, as if she didn't want to create high expectations. Isabella's heart raced. Pregnant? With Julian's baby? The possibility left her both ecstatic and terrified. How would he react? They had never talked about having children. Would he be happy or think it was too early? Let's go buy a test right now. I'll go with you, Eleanor said, determined. Don't tell anyone yet, Aunt Eleanor. Not Uncle Robert, not Julian. I want to be sure first, Isabella pleaded, still processing the possibility. The next morning, while Julian was at work, Isabella took a pregnancy test in the bathroom of the room, with Eleanor waiting outside. Well, honey, Eleanor asked when Isabella came out, with the test in her hand and tears in her eyes. Positive. I'm pregnant, Aunt Eleanor. Isabella could barely believe her own words. Eleanor pulled her into a tight hug, crying with emotion along with her. What a joy, my God. I'm going to be a grandmother. Robert is going to lose his mind with happiness. Eleanor spoke and cried at the same time. But how am I going to tell Julian? What if he doesn't want to? What if he thinks it's too soon? Isabella was in a panic, thinking of all the bad possibilities. Honey, are you crazy? That man loves you madly. He'll be radiant when he finds out he's going to be the father of your baby. Eleanor held Isabella's face, wiping her tears. But you'd better tell him today. Pregnancy secrets don't last long. Isabella spent the entire day rehearsing how she was going to tell Julian. She thought of several ways: preparing a special dinner, leaving the test on the bed, or just telling him directly. In the end, she decided it would be simple and straightforward. When Julian got home from work, she was waiting for him in the room, sitting on the bed with a small gift box in her hands. What's this, my love? It's not my birthday or anything, Julian said, approaching with a curious smile. It's an early gift, to give you some news, Isabella said, handing him the box with trembling hands. Julian opened the box and saw the pregnancy test inside, with 2 very visible lines. He stood still, looking at the test, with no apparent reaction. Julian! Isabella called out in an insecure voice. Slowly, Julian raised his eyes from the test to Isabella's face, and she saw an emotion so deep there that it almost made her cry again. Are you pregnant? He asked, his voice choked up. I am. About 2 months, I think, Isabella replied, trying to decipher his expression. Julian dropped the box on the bed and pulled Isabella into his arms, lifting her off the ground and spinning her around. I'm going to be a father. Isabella, my love, we're going to have a baby, he shouted with joy, covering her face with kisses. Are you happy? Are you really happy? Isabella asked, needing to be sure. Happy? I'm on cloud 9. Isabella, you have no idea how much I was wishing for this without even knowing I was wishing for it. Julian put her back on the ground and immediately knelt, kissing her still flat belly. Hi, baby. It's Daddy here. I already love you very much, Isabella cried, watching Julian talking to her belly, realizing her fears were unfounded. That night, they told Eleanor and Robert, who practically fainted with emotion. I'm going to be a grandfather. Eleanor, we're going to be grandparents, Robert shouted, lifting Eleanor off the ground exactly as Julian had done with Isabella. I already knew. I suspected since last week, Eleanor confessed, laughing and crying at the same time. Mom, you knew and you didn't say anything? Julian asked, surprised. I wanted Isabella to have the joy of finding out and telling you first, but I was dying to tell. Eleanor defended herself, hugging Isabella as if she were the most beloved daughter in the world. The entire family was radiant, making plans for the baby, discussing names, and imagining what it would be like when the child was born. Isabella had never felt so loved, so much a part of something, so complete. Isabella and Julian's family is on the verge of a new and beautiful chapter. But a sinister threat looms. What do you think this lawyer is really after? How will this new challenge test Julian and Isabella's love? In the following weeks, Julian became even more careful and protective of Isabella. He wouldn't let her carry anything heavy, insisted that she rest more. And every night he would talk to her belly, telling her about his day, and singing songs his mother used to sing to him when he was a child. "What do you think our baby will be like?" Isabella asked one night, lying on Julian's chest. "I hope they have your eyes, your sweet way, your kindness," Julian replied, stroking her hair. "And I hope they have your intelligence, your strength, your generous heart," Isabella completed. "Whether it's a boy or a girl, they will be very loved. They will have a family that would give everything for them." Julian kissed Isabella's head, and they both lay there in silence, imagining the future they were building together, a future full of love, family, and hope. The happiness of the Thorne family seemed complete until a rainy Monday in May, when everything began to fall apart in a way Isabella could never have imagined. She was 4 months pregnant, with her belly already showing discreetly, and Julian was bursting with pride every time he touched it. That morning, he left for work as usual, kissing Isabella and whispering, "I love you," in her ear. "Take care of our baby today, okay?" he said, touching her belly with affection before leaving. Isabella stayed home, helping Eleanor organize what would be the baby's room, choosing colors and furniture, and talking excitedly about the future that awaited them. "Honey, do you think it will be a boy or a girl?" Eleanor asked, measuring the wall where the crib would go. "I have a feeling it's a boy. I don't know why, but I feel it is," Isabella replied, passing her hand over her belly with love. Around 3 in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. Isabella went to answer, expecting it to be a delivery or a staff member. But she was faced with a tall, thin man in his 40s, very well dressed. "Good afternoon. Are you Isabella Stone?" The man looked her in the eye. "I am. How can I help you?" Isabella replied, feeling a strange shiver, as if something bad was about to happen. "My name is Mr. Davis. I'm a lawyer. I need to talk to you about a very serious matter concerning Mr. Julian Thorne." The mention of Julian's name immediately put Isabella on alert. "What kind of matter? Did something happen to him?" Isabella asked, her heart already racing with worry. "May I come in? It's a conversation that needs to be held in private," the man insisted, and Isabella, not knowing what to do, let him in. "Miss Stone, I represent the interests of the family of the late Catherine Thorne, Mr. Julian Thorne's first wife," Mr. Davis began, sitting in the main living room of the mansion. Isabella felt a cold chill in her stomach at those words. Why would someone from Julian's ex-wife's family show up now? "I don't understand. What does this have to do with me?" Isabella asked, trying to stay calm. "The family recently found out about your situation with Mr. Thorne and about the pregnancy. They are very concerned." Mr. Davis opened a folder he was carrying, taking out some documents. "Concerned about what?" Isabella sat in the armchair, her legs suddenly weak. "Ms. Stone, the family has reason to believe that you took advantage of Mr. Thorne's emotional vulnerability to benefit yourself financially. And now, with this convenient pregnancy." Mr. Davis let the sentence hang in the air, implying something terrible. "What do you mean, convenient pregnancy? What kind of insinuation is that?" Isabella got up indignantly, but the lawyer continued impassively. "The family has information that you came here through a financial agreement involving gambling debts. They believe the pregnancy was planned to secure a lifelong allowance and an inheritance for the child." The man's words were like slaps to Isabella's face. "That's an absurd lie. I love Julian and he loves me. Our relationship is real," Isabella shouted. But Mr. Davis shook his head. "Ms. Stone, I have documents here that prove a £15,000 payment was made by Mr. Thorne to settle a debt in exchange for your services. How do you explain that? He showed her papers that Isabella couldn't focus on, but the numbers were there, in black and white. Julian paid the debt because he loved me, because he wanted our relationship to be clean, Isabella tried to explain, but she felt as if her words had no power against the apparent evidence. The family also has witnesses who can testify about conversations where you confess to being interested only in the Thorne family's money, Mr. Davis continued, adding lie meta futile. That's a lie. Who are these people? I've never said that to anyone. Isabella was desperate, feeling the world crumble around her. I can give you names and depositions, but the important thing is that the family is willing to make a deal. They will pay a substantial amount for you to leave Mr. Thorne's life and not claim anything related to the child. The man placed a check on the table. £50,000. It's much more than you would earn working your whole life. Isabella looked at the check as if it were a poisonous snake. I don't want your money. I want my husband and my family, she shouted. But Mr. Davis stood up calmly. Ms. Stone, the family will take legal action if necessary. They have the resources to prove that you are a gold digger who took advantage of a grieving man. This can include action to get custody of the child when it is born. The threat made Isabella feel sick. You can't do that, she whispered, placing her hands on her belly protectively. They can and they will, if necessary. The Thorne family has a lot of power, a lot of influence. You are just a cleaner from Cambridge. Who do you think a judge will believe? Mr. Davis put the papers back in his folder and walked to the door. The check is there. You have 48 hours to decide. After that, the legal process will begin. When the man left, Isabella collapsed in the armchair, trembling and sobbing uncontrollably. Eleanor appeared, having overheard part of the conversation from afar. Honey, what happened? Who was that man? Eleanor asked, worried, sitting next to Isabella. Aunt Eleanor, they said I'm only with Julian for money, that the pregnancy was planned, Isabella explained between sobs, and Eleanor was indignant. That's absurd. How can anyone think such a thing? Eleanor hugged Isabella, trying to calm her down. But they have papers, proof, and they said they'll try to take my baby from me. Isabella was crying desperately, feeling as if all the love and happiness of the past few months had been an illusion. Honey, that's a bluff. They're trying to scare you. Julian would never allow anything to happen to you or the baby. Eleanor tried to reassure her, but Isabella was beyond consolation. When Julian got home that night, he found Isabella in the room, sitting on the bed with her eyes red from crying. My love, what happened? My mom said you weren't feeling well today. He sat next to her, trying to take her hand, but Isabella pulled away. Julian, is it true that you paid £15,000 to buy me? Isabella asked directly, looking into his eyes. Julian paused, surprised by the sudden question. Isabella, that was in the beginning, before we really knew each other. You know everything changed. He tried to explain, but Isabella got up from the bed. So it's true. You really bought me like an object. Isabella's voice was empty, lifeless. Isabella, my love, you're twisting everything. Yes, initially there was an arrangement, but then we fell in love. That doesn't mean anything now. Julian got up too, trying to approach her again. It means everything, Julian. How can I know if your love is real, or if you're just feeling guilty about what you did? Isabella shouted, all the insecurities the lawyer had planted growing like weeds in her mind. What if this pregnancy is just convenient for you? A way to justify what you paid for me? The words came out of Isabella without control, poisoned by doubt and fear. Julian looked as if she had slapped him. How can you say that? How can you question what we feel for each other? His voice was hurt, incredulous. Because I don't know what's real anymore, Isabella screamed. And in that moment, all the months of happiness seemed like just a beautiful dream that was finally ending, leaving only pain and doubt in place of the love they had built together. Isabella left the mansion that same night, carrying only a small suitcase and her shattered heart. Julian tried to stop her. He shouted her name in the rain as she got into the taxi he had called, but she didn't look back once. Eleanor and Robert watched the scene in horror, not understanding how something so beautiful had turned into a tragedy so quickly. "Julian, go after her! Don't let her leave like that!" Eleanor shouted, but Julian just stood at the door of the mansion, watching the taxi disappear into the darkness, completely devastated. For the first time in 5 years since Catherine's death, he cried uncontrollably, feeling as if he had lost his reason to live once again. Isabella returned to the simple house in the King's Hedges district, where her father and Sophia lived. Her father had gotten a job at a mechanic's shop after the debt was settled, and was trying to rebuild his life without the gambling addiction. In the months that followed, Isabella lived in a deep sadness that worried everyone around her. The pregnancy progressed normally, but she seemed to just be going through the motions, without the joy a mother-to-be should have. Sophia tried to cheer her up, telling stories from school and talking about how much she missed Julian and the Thorne grandparents. "Isabella, why don't you call Julian? I'm sure he misses you," Sophia said one day, seeing Isabella looking melancholically at a baby ultrasound. "It's complicated, Sophia. Adult relationships are difficult to understand," Isabella replied, stroking her belly that was now very big. She was 7 months pregnant when the baby was born, a beautiful boy with brown eyes, exactly like his father's, whom she named Leo. Looking at the tiny baby, Isabella felt a mixture of immense joy and even greater sadness, because Leo had so much of Julian in him that it hurt her heart. During the first few months after the birth, Isabella worked as a seamstress in a small garment factory downtown to support her son. Money was tight, but she managed to provide the essentials for Leo and help her father with the household expenses. Every night when she put Leo to sleep, she would look at his little face and see Julian there, wondering what it would be like if they were together, if the baby had grown up surrounded by the love of a complete family. Meanwhile, Julian had discovered the truth about the lawyer who had visited Isabella. After weeks of investigation, he found out that Master Davis did not represent any of Catherine's family, but a business rival who wanted to destabilize him emotionally to take one of his important contracts. The discovery left Julian furious and desperate. "Mom, how could I let this happen? How could I not protect Isabella and our son from this evil?" Julian asked Eleanor, pacing the living room like a caged animal. "Son, you didn't know. No one could have imagined that someone would be capable of such cruelty." Eleanor tried to console him, but she was also devastated by the separation. Robert had hired a private investigator to find out where Isabella was living. And when he finally got the address, the entire Thorne family felt a mix of relief and apprehension. "Julian, you need to go after her immediately. Explain everything we've discovered," Robert encouraged his son. "What if she won't listen to me? What if she really believes it was all a lie?" Julian voiced his biggest fear. "Then you'll prove to her it's true. You'll fight for your love," Eleanor encouraged him with determination. On a Saturday morning, 3 months after Leo's birth, Isabella heard a knock on the door. When she opened it, she almost fell back in shock. Julian was there, thinner, with eyes marked by insomnia and sadness, but he was still the man she loved with all her heart. In her arms was Leo, who immediately began to laugh and reach out his hands to the stranger he somehow recognized. "Isabella," Julian whispered, his eyes filling with tears at seeing his son for the first time. "Julian, what are you doing here?" Isabella asked, her voice trembling. "I found out the truth, my love, about the lawyer, about all the lies he told," Julian explained quickly, showing her documents that proved the conspiracy against them. Isabella listened in shock as Julian explained how Mr. Davis was, in fact, working for a competitor, who wanted to harm his reputation and steal an important contract. He investigated our lives and used what he found to plant doubts in you," Julian finished, looking directly into her eyes. "Isabella, every word of love I said, every moment we lived together, everything was real. You and Leo are my life." Leo, as if he understood that this was his father, continued to reach out his hands to Julian, making happy little noises. "Can I hold him?" Julian asked, his voice broken with emotion. Isabella nodded, placing Leo in his father's arms. The baby immediately nestled against Julian's chest, as if he belonged there. "Isabella, I know I hurt you by not defending our love when you needed it most. I know I let doubts get into your head instead of fighting for our family," Julian said, while rocking Leo gently. "But I promise you, in front of our son, that I will never let anyone destroy what we have. Do you want to come home? Do you want us to be a real family?" Tears streamed down Isabella's face as she watched Julian with Leo. All the love she had tried to bury to protect herself came to the surface at once. "Julian, I never stopped loving you, not for a single day," Isabella confessed, approaching him. "But I'm afraid something will happen again, that someone will try to separate us again. Then we will fight together. Any attempt to separate our family will find us united," Julian promised, extending a hand to Isabella while he continued to hold Leo with the other. "My parents are dying to meet their grandson. Eleanor has already prepared a special room for Leo, and Robert bought enough toys for an entire store." Isabella laughed through her tears, remembering how much she had missed the family that had welcomed her with so much love. "And Sophia? Can she still visit?" Isabella asked. "Isabella, my love, Sophia is our family too. Our house is her house whenever she wants," Julian assured her. When the three of them hugged together for the first time, Isabella felt that she was finally whole again. The tiny baby between them represented not only the love they shared, but also the hope of a future where nothing and no one could destroy the family they had built together. That night, when they returned to the mansion, Eleanor and Robert cried with joy at seeing Isabella and meeting Leo. "What a beautiful grandson. Robert, look at those beautiful eyes, just like his father's," Eleanor exclaimed, taking Leo in her arms like the doting grandmother she already was. Robert hugged Isabella as if she were a daughter who had returned after a long journey. "Welcome home, honey. This house wasn't the same without you." The family was finally reunited, stronger after overcoming the ordeal that could have destroyed them forever, but which instead only proved that true love always finds a way to triumph over adversity and lies. And so, dear listeners, we come to the end of Isabella and Julian's story, a journey that teaches us about the transformative power of true love. When Isabella arrived at that mansion in Cambridge, scared and hopeless, she could never have imagined that she would discover not only the love of her life, but an entire family that would welcome her as a daughter. Isabella's story shows us that it doesn't matter where we come from or what circumstances brought us to a certain place in life. What matters is what we do with the opportunities that life puts in our path. True love has the power to heal old wounds, transform hardened hearts, and create families where there was only loneliness before. Julian learned that it is possible to love again after a great loss, and Isabella discovered that her worth did not depend on the circumstances that brought her there, but on the pure love she carried in her heart. Little Leo was born to be the living proof that when two people truly love each other, they can overcome any obstacle. I hope this story has touched you as it touched me. Leave in the comments what part moved you the most. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories. A big kiss to all. May God bless your lives with much love and happiness. Until next time.